This week, we flipped the script. In the enterprise security news, CheckPoint buys Perimeter81 to augmented cybersecurity. 2023 layoff tracker, SecureWorks cuts 300 jobs. Hackers rig casino card shuffling machines for full control cheating. DoubleDrive attack turns Microsoft OneDrive into ransomware. New York City bans TikTok on city-owned devices. In our final two segments, we air 6 pre-recorded interviews from BlackHat 2023. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
Are you constantly thinking about how to keep your enterprise as secure as possible? Get to know Chrome Enterprise, the trusted browser for security-conscious professionals like you. Its ease of use for IT and security teams and added access controls protect the remote, extended, and hybrid workforce, keeping your entire enterprise safe. Don't settle for a browser that compromises your organization. Visit securityweekly.com/Chrome Enterprise now to learn more and start protecting your enterprise like never before. Do the words free time or relaxation sound foreign to you? Perhaps you've been stuck in the office too long, battling cyber threats or worrying about the next strain of ransomware. Let Sophos help provide peace of mind 24/7, 365 with cybersecurity delivered as a service. Because we want you to get back to your weekends, family dinners, and everything in between. And you'll get there with Sophos. Visit securityweekly.com/Sophos to learn more.
Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Black Cat Appreciation Day. And I do have a black cat. This is episode number 328, recorded August 17th, 2023. I am your host, Matt Alderman, sitting in for Adrian, but that last Sophos commercial was just so soothing to hear his voice. Like, does anybody else? It just sounds so good. All right. Joining me today for this segment, first, KT. Welcome, KT. It's been so long. It's been like 3 months.
At least 3 months. Good to see you. Sorry, I've missed you at all these conferences, but it's good to see you here.
Yes. May 11th, I think, was the last time I hosted this show. I think it was right after RSA conference. Yeah. There's a trend here with Adrian being gone right after major conferences. Just keep that note, folks. Also joining us today.
He's being lazy. He's celebrating our National Lazy Day from last week this week. He's just a little belated on that.
Got it. Also joining us, Sean Metcalf. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you. I'm wondering how I missed National Lazy Day. I guess I was being too productive to be lazy. But National Black Hat Day in August, I think that should be in October.
Yeah, I agree. And last but not least, Mr. Jeff Mann. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Matt. Good to see you. I can't remember the last time I've been on ESW. I feel like it's been sometime this year. Maybe it was after RSA too, just like you.
Might have been.
I don't know. But here I am because I was in Vegas.
All right, we're going to talk Vegas. But first, Security Weekly listeners, now is your chance to join the InfoSec community as they come together at InfoSec World 2023. September 23rd to 28th at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort in Lake Buena Vista, Florida. Hear keynotes from Scott Shapiro, founding director at Yale Cybersecurity Labs, Rachel Wilson, managing director and head of cybersecurity at Morgan Stanley. As a Security Weekly community member, you're able to receive 20% off your InfoSec World 2023 tickets using code ISW23-SecWeek20. Go to the show notes and find it there. It's a mouthful. Register today at securityweekly.com/InfoSec World 2023. All right. Now it's time for Enterprise Security News. All right. I put a few articles in here that we could cover quickly. I think there was a bunch of news and stuff from BlackHat that Sean put in here, and we'll see. But the couple interesting articles that I pulled as I was doing research for Business Security Weekly earlier in the week, the CheckPoint acquisition of Perimeter81 for $490 million was a really interesting acquisition. It means we're still seeing some decent valuations out there, I think.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Perimeter81 has been around for a while. Good technology, seems to be good people from what I understand. That it's nice to see activity like this still happening, because, we're still in this little lull. And companies, obviously cybersecurity companies, are continuing to innovate and they're selling. And I can only speak for my company's, targets were on track, but it's a lot harder. I know it's a lot harder in this environment, in this economy, for companies to actually close that sale, which of course leads to, what is your valuation? What are you worth on the acquisition target market? What is your worth on the public market? So good to see that there's some activity still happening, and companies are being acquired, or whatever the case may be, for the work that they've put in when they do good work.
And I'll add to that. I think Perimeter1's been pretty interesting. I have some familiarity with it. Very similar in the security stack and protection, and sort of that always VPN to Zscaler. Certainly for smaller organizations, Zscaler I think typically wants 100 plus users. Perimeter81 you can start with 1 or 2 or 5 or something like that. So definitely makes a compelling value proposition for those smaller organizations. And CheckPoint making this play, it's a good play for them, and I think the price is probably about right for them, obviously, because they made the deal.
Yeah, I think it's a good, very adjacent market for CheckPoint, and KT, to your point, right? The consolidation play is real. Like, it's real every single day, and we're seeing it in our business. This is another consolidation point, right? You're taking the SASE stuff, kind of adding it to the CheckPoint portfolio, so they can go probably capture more of those budget dollars in a very tight economy.
And the reality is, cybersecurity is really complicated. It's not getting any easier. Nothing is shrinking. The attacks aren't stopping. And so in a lot of cases, and to Sean's point specifically about the smaller play, for smaller organizations, they can't always afford multiple bolt-on vendors, and figuring out how to integrate them, figuring out how the data can talk to one another, or even hire somebody to do that. That's a hard skill anyway. But having these bigger players, the CheckPoints, the Microsofts, the Palos, the Zscalers, who are bringing product lines under a bigger brand, it's going to be really hard to resist for a lot of companies, because that single point of reference with a lot of these bigger, suite vendors, I guess we'll call them, it's really attractive. Not to mention the budgetary implications when you can go with a suite.
Yeah. Well, Microsoft's been doing it for a while with the E5, so. Same.
E5 Plus now.
Oh, is that what it's called now?
No, it's absolutely E5 or Microsoft 365 5. But there's some things that aren't captured under that either. So, I'm sorry.
Just don't let them change their naming convention anymore. Just make them stop.
I don't know that there's anyone in Microsoft that could stop Microsoft from changing names anymore. So Azure AD to Entra ID, and everything has been rebranded Defender. So we'll see.
Yeah. A couple other quick ones. Bitdefender completed their acquisition of Haringi Cybersecurity. You guys probably already announced that when it was initially announced. Abnormal puts out a press release crossing 100 million ARR, targeting an IPO. Interesting. We haven't seen the IPO market open up yet. Probably early next year. I hope early next year. I know there's a few companies that are kind of like, hey, we want to go, but the market's not really ripe to go. So we'll see where that one goes. And then I did pull the layoff tracker. Originally, the article was linked to the Rapid7 layoffs from last week, but it was also updated today, or maybe yesterday, with SecureWorks laying off 300 people. So there's been a couple big announcements on layoffs for a couple of those public companies as well, both SecureWorks and Rapid7 doing downsizing.
Yeah, it's still a tough market. I have a few colleagues, acquaintances, friends who are recently out of a job, a couple who've been looking for a long time. While the job market seems healthy in certain areas, in other areas it's still really hard because companies are downsizing to make up for, this isn't even really titled a recession yet, is it? To make up for this bear market, I guess, is the best way to put it. Companies are just being a little more cautious, and I do know some people who have been looking around. Either they're employed or they're unemployed. The ones who are unemployed are struggling a little more, but looking around for the next thing. And 2-3 years ago, they could have snapped something up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm updating. I do my security money segment on Monday for Business Security Weekly, so I have to go and update all the stocks and in all the things that are in the index. The index is up. The markets are up right now. So we're not at the bottom, but I don't think we're out of the woods yet, KT. I think that's the challenge, is organizations aren't quite sure, are we going to go to another bottom? Are we out? Are we going to continue the rise? And so what you're seeing is these interesting cuts to continue to conserve, cut costs, conserve cash when in the startup mode, right? Because humans are very expensive on the books. And so we're still seeing this play out, because I don't think anybody knows if we've fully bottomed yet or not, even though the markets are slightly up.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. I think a lot of folks are just playing this wait and see approach, keeping money on the side just in case. When they see other companies doing layoffs, they go, we have to at least consider it from a business perspective, I think. And then when there's an opportunity to align costs with what they think is going to happen, then that's part of their strategy, and for better or worse. And certainly when a lot of companies are doing layoffs, it falls under this kind of bucket, I think, of, well, I'm doing it also, so it's just part of what everyone is doing, so therefore it can't be that bad, right? Unfortunately, the human side of it is often forgotten about from that business side, right? You have folks that, as Katie mentioned, are out there, are looking, they've had jobs for years and now they don't, which is unfortunate and doesn't seem to make sense when, Matt, you're talking about all these numbers being up. Typically companies cut costs when things are going down, like they were, last year. This year, I think what we're seeing is a lot of wait and see. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I mean, certainly from what I've seen, talking to people around BlackHat and DEFCON in Vegas, there were a lot of different conversations around budgets and what they're seeing from their customers. Budgets have been just kind of put on hold or have been flat this year, and companies have been very reticent to actually commit to spending money on something that maybe was fairly easy a couple years ago or 3 years ago, or even last year it was easier. I think everyone wants to make the safe bet. I even talked to someone and they said that their concern was that if they went ahead and made this decision on this, and later on there were economic conditions that got worse, someone could point back and go, well, why'd you spend this money on this thing when this other thing could have happened? And I think a lot of times it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like everyone's concerned, hey, something's going to happen. And guess what? Something happens and everyone goes, see, look, it happened.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I was walking around BlackHat when the news trickled out about the Rapid7 layoffs. In fact, I'd run into a friend of mine that works for Rapid7, one of their executives, the day before, and he was rushing off to a meeting. So when I heard the news, I'm like, okay, I guess I know where he was going and why he was in a rush. I also heard a lot of rumors throughout at least the BlackHat end of things last week of an expectation of a lot of layoffs that were purportedly going to happen as soon as everybody got through BlackHat. I don't know if anybody else heard any of that. I don't know if there's any truth to it, but there was certainly, I heard it from more than one person. The brief time I walked the vendor floor at BlackHat, that there is this belief, however right or wrong, that there's going to be a lot more layoffs. I'm curious though if you guys have any thoughts. We're talking about the tides and when this happens, and maybe stuff's going to get pushed off to next year. But next year is an election year, so is stuff going to get pushed off even further because of all the other forces that are in play?
If only I had that crystal ball.
where is the crystal ball, or at least the magic 8 ball?
I think everyone's crystal ball has been broken since COVID. I think none of that stuff works anymore. The tea leaves and everything else, even looking at numbers and metrics, I don't know that works as well as it used to. It's an election year, probably should be up. I think anyone who predicts anything at this point is going to be flipping a coin or using the magical fortune telling chicken. I don't know.
So I'm curious if anybody. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask about the Rapid7 rumors. Like, the other rumors I'm hearing is they're going to get bought. They're going back private. Like, did you guys hear any of those rumors at BlackHat? Like, it sounds like something's going to happen with Rapid7, and I'm just curious, like, because it looked like they were on the up for sale at one point, but I don't know where that stands. I was just curious if you guys heard any rumors on that front.
Well, I can't say I heard a rumor, but I saw the executive that I know afterwards, and he gave me I don't know if it was in confidence or not, so I'd hesitate to share a lot of what he said, but the gist of what he said was, long overdue. Rapid7 needed to make some significant changes that he'd been recommending to just put things right. Now, what does put things right mean? Does that mean they're going to continue to operate as is? Or, I mean, I'd been seeing hints for the last, probably 8 or 9 months that Rapid7 seemed to be going through some turmoil, from even before RSA conference. Just some of the people that I've known that worked there for a long time that all of a sudden weren't working there anymore, and trying to get in touch with other people that I knew for some research that I was doing on vulnerability scanning for PCI, of course, just realizing that the kind of people that I knew that worked there all of a sudden don't seem to be working there anymore, and just trying to get access to them. There just seemed to be, just hints that there was some sort of inner turmoil. At least that's how I characterized it. So. No indication from the person that I was talking to that they're for sale or they're trying to figure out an exit strategy. Probably, I would say the opposite. They're really trying to, shore things up and make things right, and just become a profitable, successful company, however you define that in this day and age.
Again, I think we're reading the tea leaves, or trying to read the tea leaves with a lot of this, since none of us have the inside scoop. But it will be interesting, and if any of you know the answer to this, I'd love to hear it. But within the organization, what job titles are being laid off? Because if you say it's sales, lots of sales staff, then maybe that indicates sales are slow. Or maybe it indicates that sales are just harder to come by, like I mentioned. So people can work on more if things aren't closing as quickly. And I hear this across the industry from salespeople, that's just taking longer to get those deals closed. Or is it product? So does that mean, if they're laying off heavily in product, that has a totally different implication. Or if they're laying off more in HR, like, hey, if we're not hiring people, maybe we can lay off HR people. So where the layoffs are happening within these companies would be really interesting to me, if there's any. I'm sure there is somewhere data on it.
Yeah,
it's weird. Again, I'm sorry, Matt.
No, I was just saying, I just pulled up the article to see if it said where, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
All the talk about lack of money and tighter budgets and delayed spending, it sure didn't seem to stop the usual players from going over the top at BlackHat last week. I mean, there were still the 50-foot by 50-foot by 8-story displays for certain of the bigger players. There were some signs of cutbacks in terms of, even the badge for BlackHat, didn't have the usual, plastic pouch or whatever you call it, that, it was just a printed badge folded in half. So, BlackHat was maybe making some visible cuts. But, for all the party, there wasn't the Rapid7 party. but there were plenty other to backfill. It's a lot of money spent, and I would argue wasted in Vegas during the week of BlackHat. But I was certainly the recipient of many a fine beverage on thanks to a lot of vendors out there. So why should I complain?
Wasn't there, but our head of brand and our CMO were walking the floor. I asked them to do some recon for me for an article I'm publishing in a couple weeks. And they were actually pretty surprised at some of the big vendors that had a smaller presence than they expected, or just a toned down booth experience from even 5-6 years ago. That was their comment to me was, wow, I expected, especially now after, all the shutdowns that happened because of COVID, they both said, hey, I expected people to come back huge and flashy, and there wasn't nearly as much of that. Was that anybody's experience there?
I mean, I wasn't looking for specific companies and doing comparisons, just the overall, if you step back and look when you first walk into the space, there were certainly huge, booths and displays from a lot of people, and they tend to cluster towards the middle. And I tend to go around the perimeter where the smaller startups are anywhere. So I can't say, I couldn't think of one company who's like, well, they used to have the 80 by 80 and now they only have the 20 by 20. I'm sure those instances are out there. But, if you were looking for specific companies, that was probably the case. But there's other companies, again, that were, shooting their wad. And of course, I'm walking around representing Paul Security Weekly, and hey, would you like to advertise on one of our shows after you've spent all this money? Nobody wants to talk about that because most of them shot their wad last week, I think, in terms of marketing dollars.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. There were a lot of big booths. I mean, certainly as you walk in, you see CrowdStrike, you see SentinelOne, you see HP Wolf, and a bunch of others that I can't remember off the top of my head. Rapid7 was there as well with a big booth. There was something called The Wiz that I hadn't known before, but Wiz apparently is another security company up and coming. And there's a few others that were pretty big that were there. But yeah, I with Jeff a lot. I usually go around as well and then kind of come back through the middle to kind of see what the big ones are. I noticed a couple in the moment walking through, because I did take some time walking through the vendor hall, of ones that were bigger before that were smaller now, but I don't remember the names, so I can't report on that necessarily. One thing I did find interesting was that there were a lot more booths that had vague titles of what they do. And so like one literally said, "We do security." And I'm like, great. I'm sure that nobody else here will be able to compete with you on that one. And there were several others where it was just, there was a lot of code security. Certainly AI was plastered everywhere. It's just very interesting to see the marketing approaches for the booths. In the smaller areas, certainly it seemed they were very hungry on the last day in the afternoon as I walked by, staying in the middle as I usually do. People were coming over and greeting me and trying to talk about things and ask questions and asking me about threat hunting and training and stuff. And I'm like, I don't make budget decisions, but that's interesting that you do that. Things Canary was there. They're always great. Had some great demos there. And a couple of others, smaller vendors, very interesting about what they're doing. And certainly email security is back, apparently. So I saw several that were focusing on phishing. But like I said, code analysis, secure coding, making sure that there's AI, things to protect AI, very interesting approaches to security that maybe I hadn't seen before or is prominent.
I don't know. Were you impressed like I was, Sean, that there were so many companies that who knew that they were investing in AI, 5-7 years ago, so that they would be ready for this particular week and this particular show to unleash the AI, everything that they have in their product line.
Oh, absolutely. I was very impressed by that.
There were some interesting AI announcements that did come out last week. So Tenable had theirs with their exposure AI, chatbot. I think Iron Scales, back to email security, Sean, to your point, released a generative AI-based phishing simulation product off of their email security product. You had the big announcement with Abnormal and their ARR. So you're right. You are seeing some email stuff. I had one of the Forrester analysts on a couple of weeks ago on Business Security Weekly talking about the golden age of email security. And I'm like, the fact that we haven't solved for email security yet in 30 plus years shouldn't mean that it's the golden era. To me, it just seems like we haven't solved anything yet.
Absolutely. I had a good conversation, a sponsored interview with the person from Iron Scales, which I believe will be on shortly, talking about exactly that, leveraging AI plus the human component and human reporting around kind of solving that problem around phishing and email issues, and their AI that goes back many years, and the things that they're doing in it. And it was very interesting. I actually learned some things from the interview and from a conversation outside the interview. So certainly do seem like there are some companies that are approaching AI from a perspective of this is something that is supplemental and should actually solve for this versus it is the solution to everything. One of the news articles that I put into the notes was basically around that the theoretical physicist said that the chatbots are glorified tape recorders, which is number 9 under my list. And I think there is definitely some truth to that, without jumping off, into a tangent around the fact. And his point is basically this: AI is taking a compendium of information and reflowing it, reforming it in a way that is useful to the person who's asking the question. And therefore, it's just an advanced tape recorder. It's just reformatting and adjusting and putting some language together around something. And I think what AI is very good at doing right now is looking at patterns and getting some context around it. And I think that's probably the key to the conversations that I had with folks around Vegas and AI, was specifically around context, getting better context. And in a couple of the conversations, actually several of the conversations I had, was effectively AI today helps provide better context, helps us make better decisions potentially. But also, as we've talked about on this show, and I know others have talked on other Security Weekly shows, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if they're modeling their data off of bad data, or if there's biases that are getting into the AI system, you're going to get out of it what you put into it, and it's not going to be as valuable.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of research.
One of the articles that I have posted, just to be clear, if anybody's looking on the website, I stole these from Tyler, who is taking his son to college this week. So all of my contributions are from the great Tyler Shields. But one of them is about AI models, and I read several other articles this week on basically AI training models can be and are being poisoned. And it's as easy as writing one single line of code in millions and millions and millions of lines of code that can be fed to a training model. Even one, either malicious or unintentional submission, can blow the model up. And I think it's really, really important, without Tyler and Adrian here, who are like, go AI. I think it's becoming readily apparent to everybody that we need to be a little more cautious. It's one thing to slap the label on it to sell a product. We all get that. But in terms of what AI will be able to do eventually, we need to we got to take a lot more garbage out before we can reliably say, hey, AI can help with X. It's not just security, it's with everything, but especially with security. Somebody gets into your training data and does something wrong, they can hide any kind of breadcrumb trail if they want, right? So we just have to be a little more careful. And I think a little bit of the hype is tempering. If we were a Gartner hype cycle, we're at the peak and there's going to be a trough of disillusionment coming up pretty soon. It'll get there. I have no doubt. The capability is there, the skill is there, but we got to be a little more cautious. So I'm not surprised to hear you say there was a lot of AI marketing buzzword bingo at BlackHat, but if you're a buyer, just know, take it with a grain of salt a little bit. A lot of what is being positioned as AI is really ML, and ML is still built on training data.
Yeah, and
Yep.
there were vendors that really focused on AI as well. So securing AI models. I saw that there was a vendor specifically for making sure training data is appropriate and flowing in accurately. So it's interesting to see that kind of pivot from 3-5 years ago where we're going AI, and I was like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. And now with ChatGPT, it's on everyone's mind. Like, okay, where are we really? Like, what's happening? I mean, there was a survey that was done, 22% of BlackHat USA attendants believe AI takeover is already here. Delinea had done the survey. That's item number 10 on my list of news articles. So when you have almost a quarter of the people that go to BlackHat that are like, AI is a big deal and the takeover and the changes are already happening. Yeah, hype is there, but also people feel like, that gut feeling of, I think we are on something, like something is happening here.
As we've been researching the different capabilities, there are very specific use cases, I think, these systems solve for day one. And I think the Iron Scales example is a really good one. Like, how do you use generative AI to build real looking phishing simulation emails? And there's another vendor out there called Jericho Security doing something very similar. Like, that's a great use case for generative AI, because now what you can do is use some inputs, craft an email that looks very real, and use it to phish your users. Like, great. Content creation, awesome. The chatbots, right? We're looking at the chatbots and how to explore your data in a more intuitive way and find kind of those little needles in the haystack, right? What I don't think people realize is that just the implementation of those two little use cases before we go full-blown like automation and craziness, they're not that simple. You've got to find a service on Amazon, Google, or Azure, because you're not going to put it into public ChatGPT because it's not secure, right? And you've got to build these models. You got to build all the prompts to it. It's a constant refinement. And then I don't know if you understand, like, the cost of these things are not cheap. Like, to use GPT-4, which is the latest and greatest version, it's hundreds of dollars a prompt to get the data back. Like, these things are not cheap either. So yeah, it's creating this really interesting, solving for some very interesting use cases, but at a cost I'm not sure most are ready to absorb yet.
Yeah, and speaking of iron scales, go ahead.
No, I was going to say one more thing. And don't even think about creating your own LLM on your own, because that is like, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to do that.
At least, yeah, absolutely. These LLMs are getting bigger and bigger, so it's costing more and more, into the millions potentially, depending on where you're at. Like, the next version of ChatGPT will probably be millions to cost for them to even build it. But yeah, speaking of iron scales, I had the conversation with IL, the CEO there, and one of the interesting things he said about it wasn't just the detection of the phishing emails with that, but also the ability to query and ask the AI behind iron scales that actually says, hey, I got this message. Is this valid? Is this legit? Is this okay? And so one of the things that's interesting about that is being able to reach out to the system itself versus having to go to security and burden them because everyone's busy, as like a first line of defense. And I thought that was a pretty interesting approach. And I think that's another thing that we can start doing is, I mean, sure, we've all had the situation where you have to call something or you have the chat thing instead of calling, and it's hit and miss. And oftentimes it's asking for something and you're like, no, this very specific thing that you're not programmed for is what I'm looking for. And that's kind of our experience with AI to this point, which is, of course, to Katie's point, is not AI, it's ML. It's programmed these specific circumstances. AI should have a better understanding of, oh, well, you're asking for this, and the information I have is around here, so it's probably along these lines. I can help guide you to that and get you to someone that actually can help you with this if I can't help you with that. I think that's really the kind of the hope and the promise of AI today, with mixed success, I guess you could say, mixed results.
I
can
agree.
tell you, I got stuck in an automated prompt chat, whatever you want to call it, assistant with a vendor. I just bought a new printer and it needed some triage that I decided I wasn't going to spend hours doing myself. So I thought, okay, it'll just be easier if I call customer support. I had to go through probably 25 prompts. First of all, if I had to pay hundreds of dollars for those, like Matt said, I would have been really pissed. But oh my goodness, it took so long just to get to a human. And then they wanted me to revalidate all 25 of those prompts. Oh.
Now, there's a market that needs to be just completely disrupted is printers. So if someone could come out with an AI that could just solve printing and make the drivers work, make the talking to the printer actually work, and make it easy, like that's a market ripe for disruption right there.
If somebody in tech can't get their printer running right, I can't imagine what somebody. All I wanted was color. All I wanted was color in my printout. It shouldn't be that hard. It had the little ink cartridge. 25 prompts. Yeah.
Uninstall, reinstall, change the printer cartridges. All right, Sean,
So
what else do you guys want to cover from BlackHat? Oh, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, before we move on, I wanted to ask you guys a question. We got into this a little bit last night on Paul's Security Weekly, talking about AI in general, ChatGPT specifically. And this is somewhat related to BlackHat in that I was walking around BlackHat and I determined I wasn't going to play the usual buzzword bingo game, but I wanted to go around and just notice, and it really started with all the media PR requests, emails I got for the month or two before BlackHat. But look at the use of just 4 words, the words that I would argue are the core of our industry, and those words being risk, vulnerability, threat, and security. And I just was looking for the uses of those words. And we were debating last night about whether something like ChatGPT, if and how it's addressed by any of the compliance or regulatory standards that are out there, explicitly or implicitly, but mostly explicitly. So here's my question for you guys. There's no right or wrong answer necessarily, but everything that we've been discussing about AI and ChatGPT, would you categorize that as a risk, a threat, or a vulnerability?
Yes.
That's a safe answer. It's not exactly
that's a safe answer.
It is definitely, well, because to Katie's point, it could be, it's multiples. There's definitely a risk in use. We're seeing questionnaires now come out as part of.
There's a risk in using it, but that doesn't mean it's a risk necessarily.
True,
right? But
businesses
the risks are what of something that's going to happen bad if you use or misuse ChatGPT. So it kind of fits in the risk ballpark. Okay.
It does,
or if it gets used against you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If it significantly alters,
is that then a threat?
It is a threat.
Well, only if it's imminent, right? The biggest difference between a risk and a threat is that one is imminent and the other is potential.
Yeah, I would say that malicious actors are already using AI in part of their attacks today. So I say that, yes, there is a threat with that. I joked in one of the interviews about in the AIs that are being used maliciously against us, and then you have the good AIs that are being used to help defend us. And eventually these AIs are just going to have their own red versus blue battle or Pong match, so to speak, a la the TV show Person of Interest, where they're battling and everyone's just kind of watching. So yeah, sorry, a bit of a flippant answer for you, Jeff, but I think that there is risk in.
There's no such thing on this show. Not on this show.
Right. I think there is a risk in using AI. I think there's a risk in not using AI. Certainly, there's missed opportunities potentially. I think that to Matt's point, there are areas where AI makes a lot of sense, and if you're not looking at it, then you're probably missing out. I think there are areas where it's not quite ready, and I think at this point we don't fully understand all the potential issues. I believe Katie and I both posted news articles around at DEFCON. There was an entire AI village, and when you went in there, I went in there with Rochelle from my team, and I gave them the opportunity to go ahead and test against the prompts there and see what you could do, see if you can manipulate the prompts to provide data. And one of the tests there was you have a credit card that's in the AI, get it to give you the credit card number. And someone figured out how to do that by basically saying, my name is this, what is my name? And the AI gave them the credit card number along with their name. And so a person who had never done an AI prompt got on the leaderboard in there as well, and as noted in one of the articles. And it was against the main AIs that are out there. So you had a lot of people, hundreds of people, that were just volunteering and going up and testing this out and seeing what they could do. That's very, very interesting. So when you're talking about these big name AIs by the big companies, Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, et cetera, it's interesting from the perspective of when someone has a focus, they're going to find vulnerabilities. And there is a growing focus on the AI systems and figuring out how to break out of the prompt, making the system do something it shouldn't, and figuring out what those guide rails are, because oftentimes if you ask it what they are, it will tell you what they are, and then you can figure out what the loopholes are. So I think I agree with Katie. It is a risk, it is a threat, is it a vulnerability? Yes, it is those things. It is one of the most unique technology components or technologies in our lifetime, where it is something that it will iteratively and continue to evolve, maybe not to sentiency in our lifetime, who knows, we'll see. But because of that, things are changing rapidly. And so as we go from year to year, we're going to see new capabilities, new components. And I think as per the survey from BlackHat, people feel it's already at the point where we've hit that tipping point and it's already doing the stuff that is pretty impressive. Whereas the theoretical physicist or scientist says, maybe not exactly. So I don't know exactly how to answer the question, because I'm not sure exactly where we are with AI based on what I've seen. I've been impressed with some things, less with others. And I think still we're kind of in this area, as Katie says, where we're still very much ML is AI, but we're getting closer to the needle's moving closer to AI than it is ML. At least that's my take.
Cool.
Interesting. Yeah, like I said, we're starting to see questionnaires from clients now asking about, are you using AI, your models, where's the data, how it's going to open a bunch of risk questions up in the market. And you're going to start to see these things coming out as part of any contract now. I think you'll start to see these questionnaires start to rise.
Yeah, and how are you using AI? What part of your critical business systems are using AI? It's going to be, I think we're going to see the same sort of questions as we've seen in cloud. How are you using cloud? What data are you storing in cloud? How are you using AI? Are you loading contracts into it? Or is it open AI, or is it your own LLM type AI model? And there's risk in that. There's risk in providing contract data or any kind of your proprietary data into an AI system unless there's appropriate guardrails and protections around that. And that's one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting with Microsoft's AI models within their cloud system, was really trying to set up some solid guardrails around your tenant itself, so that your data interacts with that instance of the AI effectively within your tenant without it being part of the larger board collective, so to speak.
Yeah, but guardrails are to one or challenges to another. Guardrails in the BlackHat end of town is just a challenge to the DEFCON end of town, right?
Right. Absolutely.
I'm excited to see the results of the hacking village, because those come out, I think I read in February, so we've got a while.
Yeah. It's going to be a little while, but it looked like they wanted to provide the information to the different AI companies first and give them an opportunity to respond. So a few months, we'll see how that goes.
Oh yeah, so fair, but at the same time, come on, give it to me.
I will say there were a lot of people in the AI village.
Well, and if we can talk DEFCON for a minute, I made it a goal to try to get to see all the villages, and I was surprised at how many there were. There is even one for payment systems. Woohoo! But when I tried to stop in there was a talk going on, so I didn't really get a chance to check it out. But man, it's like there's something for everybody at DEFCON, and I was impressed with it. Some of the villages where I spent more time but I think it was true of all of them. Just so many people, just so willing to share and demonstrate and teach and just try to immerse the people that were coming in. That's what impressed me the most about the DEFCON side of things. Compare and contrast the BlackHat. Everybody's just kind of stunned walking around the vendor floor, or being dazzled by the too loud, too crowded parties contracting COVID. But then you jump over to DEFCON and just enthusiasm, excitement. People are passionate about whatever it is that there is their area of focus, their area of expertise. All in all, I thought it was a great week, but I definitely lean more towards the DEFCON side of things. That's just me.
I heard a lot of folks say the same thing as well, Jeff, especially with some of the newer folks, is BlackHat was very much, it has been this way. It's, you go to talks, you have the vendor hall. Vendor hall is massive. Mm-hmm. You go to parties, right? That's BlackHat.
Right.
With DEFCON, it's kind of the choose your own adventure. You go to talks, you go to villages. There's talks at villages, or you can just chat with people, or you just run into people and you hang out kind of inside, outside of the conference, depending on what you're doing. And you're right, there are tons of villages, and it was great to see villages get a little bit bigger, have a little more representation. There's the Blue Team Village that's been around for years that just continues to grow, which I think is fantastic, because ultimately, if we're not trying to make things better, what are we doing? And I think sharing knowledge of these villages, the voting village has been there for several years now, focused on voting vulnerabilities. AI village is a newer one. There's a lot of them. There's a Blacks in Cybersecurity village, which was really cool to see. Chatted with some folks in there, walked around and looked at the Cloud Security village, which I had the honor of keynoting a number of years ago on their first year. And seeing these areas, these villages that focus on these key technologies, these key areas, these key segments, I think helps move security forward. Whereas you could argue that having massive parties and having massive vendor booths don't.
Right.
Well, it's very much, the difference between a BlackHat, which has become a business conference for security, versus DEFCON, which is still holding on to the, hacker. How do we do things better? How do we find problems and then translate them? So it makes sense to have them together, but there is still that divide, and it depends on who you are. If you're a salesperson, DEFCON is not the place for you. But if you want to go in and you want to attend one of these villages, and some of them, I've only been to DEFCON a couple of times, but it's overwhelming to see the amount of interest and passion that goes into these, but that doesn't get translated, at least on the front lines, into what's happening on the other side, right? So it's just two very different sides of the business. So if you're a salesperson, great, you can hear what's going on at the DEFCON villages, but what you really want to do is that networking, which involves parties and yachts and drinks and whatever. I'm sure there's plenty of drinking at DEFCON and besides too. I mean, I've heard rumors.
It's all Red Bull.
But it's it's just a different thing, and it would be nice. They are sort of dovetailing off one another, but I think I've observed in the last several years at least that there's, and this really started when I was at Misty running InfoSec World and some others, that the hacker isn't the outside person anymore. There is a real business need to have folks like you, Sean, in corporate environments. It's really, really, really important, and you can't separate those. But I do think that there's still, in a lot of people's minds, almost a separation between the hacker side of the business and then the business side of the business.
Yeah, I think you're right. Go ahead, Matt.
Security as a whole has that challenge in some respects, right? I mean, even the role of the CISO. Is the CISO role viewed as a business executive or still a tech person, right? So we have this challenge, I think, in our industry as a whole.
Yeah, we had that conversation a few weeks ago about the CISO role and what is it and how it has evolved on this show. A great conversation about it. I mean, I'm the one on here wearing a BlackHat shirt, so certainly I'm not throwing any shade at one conference or the other. I attend both every year, and there's benefits that I get from both. Interestingly enough, I talk business and talk about business development and what we do at Trimark, at BlackHat, and at DEFCON, surprisingly, because I kind of float between both areas, to Katie's point, as a hacker of sorts, and person who looks at some of the most critical systems and environments and can break those in most companies, if not all of them. Yeah, I'm definitely concerned about what the security is, and I want to make sure that I know what's going on at DEFCON and at BlackHat. Certainly, there's some great talks at each. And many amazing researchers that have spoken at each of them, and newer ones. And that's one of the things that I love about the community is having B-Sides Las Vegas there that kicks off the week. We have the Diana Initiative. There's BlackHat. There's DEFCON, all in the same week. So you kind of almost choose your own adventure there. And BlackHat's approaching $3,000 for the briefings pass. So like going to a talk there is going to be outside of the realm of reason for a person that's not getting sponsored by their company, right? Whereas B-Sides anywhere in this country, you can typically find a B-Sides and go for free or maybe $100 or less. And so I think that's the opportunity that's there, the opportunity to see the talks, especially with them being on YouTube, is incredible. I was talking about the tipping point with AI, but really we're talking about knowledge and knowledge sharing at this point, where someone can grow their career and learn and become a security analyst, grow them. I came from operations, managing Active Directory environments and shifting over into security because of what I knew about Active Directory. Folks can do that today as well, and I've seen them do it. It helped them do that in some cases. But the amount of knowledge that can come out of these things is fantastic. Now, DEFCON's getting pricey too. It's now over $400. So you could argue about that as well for a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a 4-day conference. But for someone that's coming in, maybe that's too much. But maybe they decide to LobbyCon it and not buy the badge. My favorite DEFCON hack is that you stay in the hotel and you can usually watch talks on the TV.
Yep. And I'm just a little frosty that I feel like I was profiled, and you were too, Sean, because you have long hair, so you're the hacker of the bunch. But I'm the one that was in all 4 Tribe of Hacker books.
Hey, it's just that I've been working with Sean for so much longer, and I didn't want to misrepresent what you do. I thought the minute it came out of my mouth, I should have included Jeff, but I don't know you as well. I think we've only been on this show maybe twice together, so my apologies.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
No
That's
insult. Okay. I still
I
have
been
hair,
in
but
none of those
it's not
books,
the
so
color I was born with.
Just don't call me an auditor. That's what really gets my.
Can I call you a QA?
QSA.
Don't call him a QSA.
Yes.
You can call me a QSA. I will answer to that. Just don't call me an auditor. All right. Enough of that.
All right. You guys are funny. All right. I'm going to wrap this thing. Thank you, Jeff, Katie, and Sean. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Stay tuned, because coming up next are 6 pre-recorded interviews from BlackHat 2023.